Hi everybody, my name's Terri. I'm an alcoholic. I'm just going to get right to it. I've been on the most tremendous healing journey of my life since I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. At the point I'm at right now in my recovery at 25 years, I've learned some things that have really helped me that I'm going to pass on to the group as far as my healing journey. And the very first thing that I was told when I got sober was, remember where you come from. Well, up until just recently, I didn't really know where I came from. I was told in order to find out where I came from, I would have to go back to where my ancestors came from. And I would have to look at the past lives of people in my family that went before me in order to see what made me me. It's pretty much as simple as that for myself. So I'm actually going to start at the very beginning, and I'm going to talk really fast so I can say as much as I can in the short time. I'm not going to keep everybody over an hour. My grandmother, my mother's mother, was Norwegian. She was an immigrant to the United States of America. She came from Norway. She was tall, beautiful, blonde hair. My mother's dad, my grandfather, was Hungarian, and he came to the United States as an immigrant as well. They were very poor, very, very poor. My mother told me they were lucky if they could get even one pair of shoes for the year. And, but they got an opportunity. My grandfather, the Hungarian grandfather, was a fisherman. He fished the high seas anywhere he could go. That's how he made his living. And he was a good fisherman. One of the family members ended up in California and encouraged my mother's parents to come to California for more opportunity. My mom and dad, well, my mom's family settled in the Wilmington, San Pedro area. And at the time they came there, it was the largest fishing port, I think, in the United States at the time. My mother's family went there to open a fish market. My dad's family was already established there. My dad's family came from a different background. He came from the area, his ancestors came from Italy and France and made their way to California. So they came from two different worlds. One day at the fish market, my dad was going by delivering the paper, and he met my mom. My mom was 16. My dad was 17 at the time they met. They married about, I want to say 6 months after they knew each other, maybe not even that long. They had to wait for California law for my mom to turn 17. She was pregnant with me, 4 months pregnant, when my mother and father married. My dad was 18 years old, and in the state of California, they could not be married unless they had their parents' permission and were 17, so my mom had to wait. They were going to name me Terri, whether I was a boy or a girl, because my dad's name is Terri. My dad dropped out of high school in his senior year. My mother dropped out of high school in her junior year. When I was brought home from the hospital, they brought me to an efficiency apartment that was attached to the liquor store that my father was a clerk at. He not only worked at the liquor store, he drove a wrecker for the LA Police Department, and he was also what was called a gopher at the bank, basically the errand boy at the bank, the coffee boy. One night at the liquor store, a man came in and held a gun to my dad's head. And I was in the back crying. And my dad basically begged for his life and said, "I have a newborn baby in the back room. Please don't kill me." And the man did not kill him. He robbed him, took everything he could in the store. I need to tell you a little bit about my mother. My mother showed signs of mental illness as a teenager that went untreated. She carried that into her adulthood. When I was born, my mother neglected me. She left me to cry alone a lot. I remember going hungry a lot as a little kid. It wasn't too long after she and my father had 3 more children. And all of us are less than 2 years apart. Well, after the robbery, that was the pivotal turning point of my father's life. That's when he made the biggest decision he ever made in his life. He decided, without a high school diploma, and all that he had, that he was going to be somebody, that he was going to become somebody. The time I was born, the Beatles were just coming into America. John Kennedy was being shot. The Vietnam War was going on. There was a lot of stuff happening in California. I want you to remember that everything starts from either the West Coast or the East Coast and comes inward. So my family was in a hot spot. I was 25 miles from Hollywood, from the neighborhood of Hollywood. I was living in a community mostly made up of Japanese, because the Japanese there were the ones who basically did the fish, and my grandfather just got lucky to come in. Soon the San Pedro port merged with the Long Beach port. When that happened, everybody in my family went to work in the port at the big shipyard. They made a lot of money. A lot of money. My dad's grandparents and great-grandparents. They were smart with their investments. They invested in oil rigs because they were pumping oil in that area as well. I had an oil rig probably 10 feet from where I would play out in the yard in California. We had an oil rig in our church parking lot. So those are the surroundings I was raised up in. I remember being alone a lot in my home with my mom and feeling very responsible for everything that went on in the house. We lived in a brand new house. We had Cadillacs and convertibles. My dad was an overnight success, but it wasn't good enough for him. He could clearly see that in LA County, he would only be a small fish in a big pond. He had a dream, and he brought his dream to Arkansas. And the reason why he brought his dream to Arkansas is because he remembered from years and years ago that some of his ancestors on his side were dirt farmers in Lake City. And that's how we got to Jonesboro. My dad wanted a better life for his kids. He didn't want his kids growing up in the chaos of LA County. But I want to tell you some things that really shaped my personality then. And I think it's a part of myself that, of course, I cherish all of myself. But this is a part of myself that is one of my favorite parts of myself. When I was a little girl, my dad would actually dress me up like a baby doll. He would have his mother fix my hair in a ponytail, let me wear some lipstick. And he would put me in the convertible car with his brother and a couple other friends. Remember, they were 18, 19 years old. They were still out cruising. But my dad was showing me off to the world. He would take me driving down Hollywood Boulevard. That's a part of me that I love. That attraction to that glamour, to that something special in the air. I mean, you have to admit that if you were in that place, you would probably feel that way too. It was almost magical. It was almost like I lived in Disneyland at times. But then at other times, I was struggling to survive with my mother at home. The only way I survived with my mother at home, with all four of us, is when a Mexican man would stop by once every month and allow all the children in the neighborhood to sit on a pony, and we would get to wear a cowboy hat. That was a big highlight for me in my life with my mom. He did it for all the children in the neighborhood. We came to Arkansas, and wow, things really took off for my dad. He had a lot of success and fame from the very beginning. I've never known my father not to be in the spotlight. I've never known my father to do anything small. I've never known my father not to be what everybody who knew him called him was a high roller. He would risk everything at times for his dream. I remember when we got to Arkansas, the whole family and him, they all pitched in and bought a whole bunch of land on what's now Caraway Road. He bought all the land down where Highland is, where the Turtle Creek Mall is. That was our family's, all that land. He had a dream. He wanted to build a city. He got interested in real estate. And my dad became a very successful commercial developer in the city. It was very hard growing up under that limelight. This is what's really crazy. My dad was really my best caregiver. I see all his faults. That really has nothing to do with that. He took care of me when I was a little girl. My mom was not able to. My mother was with us, but she was an absent mother. And her behavior was off the wall. And my dad really struggled with my mother's family because of the differences. My mother's family were immigrants. They had loud, boisterous voices. They cursed. They drank. They were like wild adventurers. Just, it couldn't have been more opposite. And that's not going to last, and especially when you get married when you're teenagers. So there came a point, and my dad explained everything to me after I got sober, that he could no longer deal with the chaos. And that he did not know my mother. I didn't know my mother. My siblings didn't know my mother. I knew mostly about my dad, but not my mom. They divorced, and my mother fell into poverty, and she was doing the best she could in her mental state, living in poverty with 4 children. We didn't have food many times. That was a scary time for me. We didn't know where she was at. A lot of times. Many times I would stay up all night long, just hoping that she would come home in time for school. I was late for school every day. I had to get dressed in the car and sometimes I couldn't even brush my teeth. But it was opposite with my dad. And very extreme opposite. My dad sent me to charm school twice. My dad always continued to make sure I was dressed properly and that I was like his Hollywood, his little Hollywood star. He always has gotten happiness from that. And that is okay. Because that's a part of me that I love. And I've been able to give that to my dad over the years. How I ended up having my first drink was after my parents divorced and my mother went into poverty with 4 children. When I was 15 years old, at 5 a.m. in the morning, she pulled up at my dad's apartment at Chateau Apartments, still there. My dad had been married for 1 week to his 3rd wife. My mom pulled up and knocked on the door and left all 4 of us standing there and drove away in her car. "43 years went by, and during that 43 years, most of the time we never knew where she was at or what state she was in. She did crazy things. One time she was a manager for midget wrestlers. One time she ran a little booth of pickup ducks, like in the swimming pool. But she didn't used to always be that way. She only turned that way after she was shot in the head from her estranged boyfriend who she was leaving. My mother was a victim of a violent crime in Hellertown, Pennsylvania. My mother was having an affair with a married man. And the married man was her best friend's husband. The boyfriend she was trying to break up with found out about it. And he hid outside a trailer and shot 4 people. The man died. My mother kept a bullet lodged in the back of her neck until the day she died because it was too dangerous to remove. She lost an eye. The bullet went through her eye, ricocheted off her skull, and lodged. My mother had lead poisoning slowly from then on. So it didn't help with the other things she was already dealing with, especially with her age and dementia. I remember a time when my mother was in business college. I remember the time that my mother graduated with straight A's. She didn't have a high school diploma, but there was a business college on Union Street here in Jonesboro. And I remember sitting out in the car while she took her classes. She even ended up working for the Alaska Game and Fish Commission in Juneau, Alaska. My ties with Alaska stayed strong for numerous years. There was never a time that I stopped going up there to fish with my family. My family in Alaska opened a private fishing resort where people fly in and do silver salmon fishing. That's where I learned to fish at age 12. I remember my first time out was in Prince William Sound. Some of the things I've experienced in my life just fascinate me. Anyway, my dad was a big success in Arkansas. He was a workaholic. We never saw him. He ran with crowds he should not have ran with. He dabbled in drinking, got in trouble for that. never touched alcohol again, never said he was an alcoholic, but never touched alcohol again. He saw what that would do to him. My first drink was the day after we moved into a house from the apartment with my dad and stepmom. I was unpacking a trunk and just, when you see letters and stuff in a trunk with like hearts and like stuff on them, teenager letters. And I never knew my mother was pregnant with me when they got married. I never knew this. And when I opened the trunk, I read the letters. And they were letters to the people that they were with at the time that they got pregnant with me, saying they could not be together anymore. And basically, both of them, my mother never forgot to remind me until the day she died that I was the reason she never married the love of her life. To the day she died. My first drink was the day after I found those letters. I was 16 years old. My dad never brought it up. When I was in high school, even through all my drinking, he came to all my ball games. I was a cheerleader. I was popular in high school. We had an extremely nice house. We had a maid. My dad worked and provided for his children above and beyond. At one time, he was just, I guess, like a hero to me. And I was always afraid of my mother. She was a scary person for me because I didn't know her. My first marriage was to my children's father. He was my high school sweetheart. I met him when I was 7 years old. We stayed together for a long time. He was my true love. I mean my true love. Good looking. Ooh. All the women. But he was really, you could see his heart. After I got sober, he was well into his crystal methane addiction. He wasn't himself. We had been divorced 7 years when he died of a drug overdose. The night he died, his family called me. And we had been divorced for 10, 12 years because I was already well into my second marriage. And his family asked me to come be with them. And they asked my husband at the time to be a pallbearer in his funeral. And he was. So glad we were able to give that gift to that family, my children's family. I guess to wrap it up, there's so many more pieces of my life that I've looked at and put together. And this will be my final words. My 11-year-old grandson was over at my house about 3 weeks ago. We were working on a project. And I had these little crystals, all crystals, amethyst and different things. And I sat down with them and took a piece of paper and I drew a whole heart. Colored it in. And I said, see, Henry, this is a whole heart. Then I went to the pieces and I said, I bet you these pieces would fit right back in perfect. So he and I took the little crystals and we made a heart. And he looked up at me and smiled. I hope I can leave as best a legacy as both my parents did. I have to leave the podium, but I want people in this room to know that I was my mother's legal guardian the last years of her life. And after she died, I learned everything about her. My God, she was amazing. The things she accomplished that I never knew. And the wonderful person that she was inside. And today, I'm not afraid of my mother anymore. I'm not. This is my granddaughter. This is the granddaughter that favors me the most. She looks just like me when I was a little girl. She wears her hair on the same side and everything. I put this on tonight because she's in my heart. My children are going through a hard time. All of us are. Everybody in this room is. We all have to pray for each other. And understand that we don't know what other people are going through. And we must be kind. And that's where I'm at in my recovery today. I'm glad I'm here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Terry.